Clara Monroe stepped onto the polished stage, her faded cardigan brushing against trembling hands. The studio lights glared, exposing every wrinkle on her face. "She's just a sweet old lady," a producer whispered, smirking to his assistant. "This'll be quick." The audience tittered, their eyes flicking over her scuffed shoes. "Did she wander in by mistake?" a woman muttered, her voice dripping with pity. Clara stood still, clutching a worn notebook. To them, she was a shadow invisible in their glittering world. But then she spoke, and the room froze. Her words weren't loud, but they cracked the air. Before we dive deeper into Clara's journey, if you've ever felt underestimated or unseen, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps us share stories that remind us all true strength doesn't need a spotlight to shine. Stick with us. You won't believe what happens next. Every crystal chandelier in the studio sparkled like a promise Clara Monroe could never touch. In her small town of Redding, California, Clara's world was softer, quieter, far from the dazzle of Los Angeles. Mornings began with the hum of her kettle steam, curling around a chipped mug of chamomile tea. At 70, she lived alone in a one-bedroom bungalow, its walls lined with faded photos and shelves of dog-eared novels. Her days unfolded simply tending her garden, reading by the window, singing hymns at the community church. Her voice, warm and weathered, blended into the choir's harmony, never seeking the front row. Decades ago, Clara dreamed of music. As a girl, she'd stand on her family's porch singing to the stars, imagining a stage. But at 18, a college professor's sharp words, "You've got heart," but no spark cut her dreams down. She turned to teaching, then caregiving for her husband Tom, until cancer stole him when she was 47. Raising her son Daniel alone, she buried her songs beneath years of sacrifice. Now, her evenings ended with a music box, its tinny lullaby, the only echo of her old hopes. That spring morning, sunlight spilled through her lace curtains as Clara puzzled over a crossword. The phone jangled, shattering the quiet. It was her friend Miriam Tate's voice, bubbling with excitement. "Clara, have you checked your email? They're holding auditions for Starlight Stage at the Redding Civic Center. You should go." Clara laughed, brushing off the idea. "Those shows are for young folks with big dreams, not old ladies like me." Miriam pressed on. "I've heard you sing at church, Clara. When you let his eyes on the sparrow last Easter half, the congregation was in tears. You've got something special." Clara's fingers brushed the music box on her side table, its silver edges worn smooth. She hadn't thought of performing in years, not since Tom used to hum along to her kitchen serenades. Miriam's words lingered, stirring a flicker of what-ifs. That night alone, she hummed softly, her voice filling the dim living room. It felt like whispering to an old friend. Unbeknownst to Clara, Miriam had acted in secret, uploading a video of that Easter solo to the show's website. The clip, grainy but soulful, caught the eye of a producer scanning thousands of submissions. Days later, another call came, this time from an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Monroe, I'm Lauren Pierce from Starlight Stage. Your video moved us. We'd love for you to audition in Los Angeles next week. All expenses paid." Clara froze, her heart thudding. "I didn't send a video." A chuckle came through the line. "Someone did, and we're glad. You've got a gift. Will you come?" She hesitated, picturing Tom's smile, Daniel's pride. After a sleepless night, she called Daniel, now 40, a mechanic in Sacramento. "Mom, you've got to do this," he urged. "You gave up so much for me. This is your turn." Clara boarded a plane, her first flight in years, clutching a small suitcase and a notebook with lyrics to "My Funny Valentine," a song Tom loved. Los Angeles greeted her with a rush of noise, honking cabs, flashing billboards, a city pulsing with ambition. At the Starlight Stage studio, the air smelled of hairspray and coffee. Contestants, young and polished, strutted past, their laughter sharp as glass. A young assistant, Tessa Grant, met Clara at the entrance, her smile tight. "Ms. Monroe, follow me. You're early." Her tone carried a hint of dismissal, as if Clara were a guest who'd wandered into the wrong party. The studio was a cathedral of wealth, its marble floors gleaming under golden lights. Velvet curtains framed the stage, and the audience's chatter buzzed like a distant swarm. Clara's cardigan and sensible shoes stood out against the sequined dresses and tailored suits. A group of contestants glanced her way, one whispering, "She must be someone's grandma." Another smirked. Did she get lost on her way to bingo? Clara adjusted her glasses, her face calm, but her hands tightening around her notebook. Backstage, a producer named Ethan Cole scanned his clipboard, his eyes narrowing at Clara's name. "Put her on first," he told Tessa. "She's the emotional opener, quick and sweet." His words, though soft, carried the weight of a verdict. Clara overheard her lips pressing into a thin line. Yet as she stood in the shadows, a stagehand, an older man with kind eyes, nodded at her, almost knowingly. His small gesture lingered a quiet hint that Clara wasn't as out of place as they thought. The stage loomed ahead, its lights harsh and unforgiving, waiting to expose her to a world that had already judged her. Nobody bothered to offer Clara Monroe a seat. The backstage of Starlight Stage buzzed with frenetic energy. But for Clara, it was as if she'd stepped into a room where the air itself pushed her away. Her faded cardigan hung loosely on her frame, a stark contrast to the glittering outfit swirling around her. The studio's marble floors echoed with the sharp clicks of heels, the hum of confident laughter, and the clink of coffee cups passed between young contestants. Clara stood near a velvet curtain, her notebook of lyrics clutched tightly, her eyes scanning for a friendly face. None met her gaze. A young contestant with sleek blonde hair, Jenna Lyle, leaned toward her friend, her voice carrying just enough to sting. "Is that lady part of the show, or did she wander in from a senior center?" Her friend, a dancer in a sequined crop top, stifled a giggle. "Maybe she's here to cheer for her grandkid." Their eyes flicked to Clara's scuffed loafers, then away as if she were a smudge on the polished set. Clara's lips tightened, but she adjusted her glasses and looked down at her notebook, tracing the words of "My Funny Valentine" with a steady finger. Tessa Grant, the assistant who'd greeted her at the entrance, hurried past, clipboard in hand. She paused, glancing at Clara with a mix of pity and impatience. "Ms. Monroe, you're up soon. Just wait here, okay? Don't wander off." Her tone was the kind used for a child, not a woman who'd raised a son through grief and hardship. Clara nodded, her voice soft. "I'll stay put." Tessa didn't linger, her heels already clicking toward a group of contestants warming up their vocals, their voices sharp and showy. The waiting area grew crowded, a kaleidoscope of ambition and youth. A young man with a guitar slung over his shoulder bumped into Clara, his elbow grazing her arm. "Oops, didn't see you there," he mumbled, not looking back, as he joined a circle of laughing friends. Clara stepped back, her shoulder brushing the curtain. She felt like a ghost present, but unseen, her presence an inconvenience to the vibrant world around her. Still, she stood tall, her face calm, though her knuckles whitened around the notebook. Ethan Cole, the producer, appeared, his tailored suit gleaming under the studio lights. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Clara for a brief dismissive moment. "Tessa," he called, waving her over. "Make sure our early act is ready. We need her on and off quick to set the tone." His voice was low, but not low enough. Clara caught every word, her breath catching, like a snag in fabric. Early act. The phrase landed like a verdict, marking her as a fleeting moment, a tearjerker, to warm up the crowd before the real talent took over. Jenna, overhearing Ethan, sauntered closer, her smile sharp as a blade. "So you're the opener? That's sweet." She tilted her head, her voice dripping with false warmth. "What do you sing, like old church songs or something?" Clara met her gaze, her eyes steady. "A love song, my husband's favorite." Jenna's smile faltered, but she recovered with a shrug. "Cute. Good luck out there. You'll need it." Her friend chimed in, softer but no less cutting. "Yeah, it's brave to try at your age." The words hung in the air, a delicate poison spreading through the room. The other contestants didn't speak to Clara directly, but their glances spoke volumes. A dancer adjusted her headband, her eyes skimming Clara's gray hair with a faint smirk. A singer practicing scales paused to whisper to her friend, their laughter spiking as they glanced her way. The collective judgment was silent, but deafening, a chorus of assumptions about her age, her clothes, her place in their world. Clara's fingers brushed the music box in her pocket, its weight a small anchor. She said nothing, but her silence was heavier than their words. Ethan clapped his hands, his voice booming. "All right, people, let's move. Ms. Monroe, you're first. Follow Tessa to the stage." The room seemed to pause, eyes turning to Clara, some curious, others amused. Tessa gestured impatiently. "This way. Don't trip on the cables." Clara nodded, her steps measured as she followed the notebook pressed to her chest. The stagehand from earlier, the older man with kind eyes, caught her gaze as she passed. He gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable, but warm, a flicker of something that felt like respect. The stage loomed ahead, its lights blinding the audience's murmur, a distant roar. Clara's heart pounded, but her face remained serene, her dignity, a quiet shield against the storm of disdain. The weight of their laughter, their whispers, their pity pressed against her, but she didn't bend. She stood at the edge of the spotlight, her hands steady. Now the notebook opened to a song that carried a lifetime of love and loss. The crowd waited ready to dismiss her, unaware that the woman they'd judge was about to rewrite their story. The stage lights dimmed, but Clara Monroe stood frozen as if the room had exhaled and left her behind. The buzz of Starlight Stage faded contestants' laughter. The clink of coffee cups, the sharp whispers of judgment, all dissolved into a heavy silence. Clara sat alone in a small backstage room, her notebook open on a metal folding chair, the lyrics of My Funny Valentine blurring under her gaze. The weight of the crowd's smirks, Jenna's barbed words, and Ethan's dismissive verdict pressed against her chest, each a stone piling onto a long-buried ache. She was 70, a widow, a mother who'd given everything to others. What was she doing here chasing a dream that had died decades ago? Her fingers trembled, brushing the music box in her pocket. Its familiar weight brought back a memory, sharp and unbidden. At 18, Clara had stood in a college auditorium, her voice soaring through a folk ballad. The room had clapped, but her professor, Dr. Margaret Hale, waited until the others left. You sing with feeling, Clara, but it's not enough. You lack the fire to stand out. Those words had been a blade slicing through her courage. She had packed away her sheet music, taken a teaching degree, and let silence claim her voice. Now in this sterile room, Dr. Hale's judgment echoed louder than the studio's chatter. Maybe Jenna was right. Maybe she was just an old lady out of place. Clara's thoughts drifted to a quieter pain. When Tom died, she'd sat by his hospital bed, singing softly to him as machines beeped. He'd squeezed her hand, whispering, "Keep singing, Clara. It's who you are." She hadn't. Raising Daniel alone, paying bills, mending a broken heart, she'd let music become a luxury she couldn't afford. Now, staring at her wrinkled hands, she wondered if she'd been wrong to come here to open a door she'd locked long ago. Was this courage, or just a foolish reach for something already lost? A soft knock broke her spiral. Daniel stepped in his work boots, scuffed his face, etched with worry. He'd driven overnight from Sacramento, leaving his garage behind. "Mom, you okay?" Clara looked up, her eyes glistening. "I don't know, Danny. I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." Daniel knelt beside her, his voice steady. "You're not pretending. You're the woman who sang to me when I was scared, who taught me to keep going." He pulled out his phone, showing her Miriam's video from Easter. Clara watched herself, her voice filling the church faces in the pews, soft with awe. "You did that, Mom. Not some young star. You." The video stirred another memory, a story she'd never told Daniel. Years ago, at a school talent show, a shy student had sung off-key Trembling under the crowd's snickers. Clara, then a teacher, had walked onto the stage, put an arm around the girl, and joined her in a duet. The room had gone quiet, then cheered. That moment had felt like a spark, a glimpse of the singer she might have been. Now, Clara's fingers closed around the music box, its edges cool against her palm. She opened it, letting the faint lullaby fill the room. Her lips parted and she hummed a single note, soft but clear. Daniel smiled, squeezing her hand. "You're not here to prove anything to them. You're here for you." Clara nodded, her breath steadying. She slipped the music box back into her pocket and stood smoothing her cardigan. The doubt lingered, but something else flickered beneath it, a quiet resolve, like a candle refusing to go out. The stage waited beyond the door, its lights harsh but no longer suffocating. Clara took a step forward, her notebook tucked under her arm, ready to face the world that had tried to erase her. Clara Monroe hadn't left the stage. Her footsteps echoed softly on the polished wood, each one a quiet defiance against the whispers that had tried to erase her. The Starlight Stage studio hummed with anticipation, its lights casting a harsh glow over the audience's skeptical faces. Clara stood at the edge of the spotlight, her faded cardigan a faint silhouette against the velvet backdrop. The notebook in her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady, fixed on a point beyond the crowd. Something in the air shifted like the hush before a storm. The host, a man with a practiced grin, stepped forward, his voice booming through the speakers. "Next up, from Redding, California, a woman who proves dreams don't fade with time, Clara Monroe." The applause was polite, tepid, the kind reserved for an underdog expected to stumble. The three judges, a pop diva with a sharp bob, a grizzled music producer, and a Broadway choreographer exchange glances, their pens poised over notepads. The pop diva leaned forward, her smile kind but fleeting. "Ms. Monroe, what brings you here today?" Clara took a breath, her voice soft but clear. "A friend sent a video of me singing at church. I didn't plan this. I'm here because I've spent too long being silent." A murmur rippled through the audience, not mocking, but curious. The Broadway judge raised an eyebrow. "And what will you sing?" Clara's lips curved faintly. "My Funny Valentine." It was my husband's song. The producer scribbled something, his expression unreadable. "That's a bold choice. Let's hear it." The opening notes of the song drifted from the orchestra, delicate and wistful, like a memory unfolding. Clara closed her eyes, her hands lifting the microphone with a grace that belied her age. Her first note was tentative, a husky whisper that made the audience shift in their seats. Ethan Cole, watching from the control room, leaned back smirking to his assistant. "Get the close-ups ready. This'll tug some heartstrings." But then Clara's voice grew not loud, but deep, rich, with the weight of a life lived fully, love loss and quiet resilience. Each lyric poured out like a confession, her tone weaving through the melody with an intimacy that silenced the room. The pop diva's pen stopped moving. The producer's jaw tightened. In the third row, an older woman clutched her husband's hand, her eyes glistening. A teenager slouched moments ago sat up staring as if seeing something sacred. Clara stepped closer to the stage's edge, her cardigan swaying, her voice rising into the chorus. It wasn't flawless, but it was true, every note carrying the ache of Tom's laughter, the warmth of Daniel's pride, the girl she'd once been. Backstage, Jenna Lyle, the blonde contestant who'd mocked her, stood frozen, her arms crossed but her eyes wide. The stagehand, with kind eyes now near the wings, nodded to himself, as if he'd known all along. The truth began to unravel, not through words, but in the way Clara held the stage. A whisper reached Ethan's earpiece from a researcher in the booth. "Wait, sir, that video? It wasn't just a church clip. She was a guest soloist at a regional choir festival last year. Won praise from a critic in Sacramento." Ethan's smirk faded, his hand hovering over the console. Clara's final note lingered soft, but piercing like a candle flame, refusing to flicker out. For 5 seconds, the auditorium was still, the silence so thick it seemed to hum. Then a single clap broke through, sharp and clear. Another followed. A woman in the back row stood, her hands pounding together. The teenager jumped up whistling. The applause swelled into a roar, a wave crashing over the stage. The pop diva was on her feet, clapping fiercely. The Broadway judge wiped a tear, shaking her head. The producer simply stared, his pen forgotten. Clara lowered the microphone, her face calm, almost distant, as if she hadn't noticed the uproar. The host rushed to her side, his voice trembling with genuine awe. "Ms. Monroe, you've just redefined what this stage is for." The audience roared louder, some shouting her name. Jenna's face flushed, her arms dropping as she turned away. Ethan in the control room muttered to himself, "Unbelievable." He scribbled a note, crossing out the red mark next to Clara's name. Clara spoke, her voice steady, cutting through the noise. "I didn't come here to win. I came to sing for myself. Just once." She turned, her steps slow but sure, and walked off the stage. The crowd's cheers followed her, a tide of respect she hadn't sought but had earned. Backstage, the air felt different now, charged with a new energy. The other contestants, once dismissive, avoided her gaze, their laughter replaced by uneasy silence. Clara's notebook rested in her hands, its pages worn but unbroken, ready for whatever came next. Jenna Lyle's sharp laughter had vanished, replaced by a silence that weighed heavier than the studio's golden lights. Clara Monroe's voice still echoed in the minds of the Starlight Stage audience, her performance a ripple that had become a wave. Backstage, the air was thick with a new tension, as if the room itself had taken a breath and held it. Clara stood quietly near a velvet curtain, her notebook tucked under her arm, her faded cardigan untouched by the chaos her song had unleashed. The world that had dismissed her now scrambled to rewrite its own narrative. Ethan Cole, the producer, emerged from the control room, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his usual confidence frayed. He approached Clara, his smile strained, a bouquet of white roses in hand. "Ms. Monroe," he began, his voice softer than before, "we owe you an apology. We thought you'd be a brief moment, but you changed the game tonight. His words were careful polished, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Clara met his gaze, her face calm, almost serene. Sometimes being underestimated is its own kind of gift, she said, her voice steady. It lets you surprise people. Ethan nodded, his throat bobbing, and handed her the flowers before retreating, his clipboard forgotten. The other contestants, once a chorus of smirks and whispers, now hovered at a distance. Jenna Lyle lingered near a water cooler, her sequin dress catching the light, but her posture was slumped, her arms crossed tightly. She caught Clara's eye and offered a hesitant nod, her lips parting as if to speak. "I didn't mean anything by it," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "You were really good." Clara's expression softened, but she didn't reply, her silence more eloquent than words. Another contestant, the guitarist who'd bumped into her earlier, approached, his face flushed. "Ms. Monroe, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were, legit." Clara tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "I'm just me. That's enough." The audience, still buzzing from Clara's performance, spilled their awe onto social media. Phones glowed in the auditorium, fingers tapping out posts that lit up screens across the country. "America's grandma just stole the show," one tweet read, racking up thousands of likes. A video clip of Clara's final note, shared by a teenager in the crowd, went viral, amassing 500,000 views in hours. Comments poured in, each a testament to her impact. "I'm 62 and starting guitar lessons because of her. She's proof it's never too late." Her voice felt like home. The tide had turned, not with anger, but with a quiet, undeniable truth. Backstage, Tessa Grant, the assistant who'd treated Clara like an afterthought, now hovered nearby. Her clipboard clutched like a shield. "Ms. Monroe, can I get you anything? Water, a chair." Her voice was eager, almost desperate, a stark contrast to her earlier indifference. Clara shook her head gently. "I'm fine, thank you." Tessa lingered, then blurted, "I told Ethan you'd be special." "I knew it." Clara's eyes twinkled, but she let the moment pass, her grace exposing the hollowness of Tessa's sudden loyalty. A new subplot unfolded in the wings, where the stagehand with kind eyes, now revealed as a retired choir director named Samuel Reed, watched Clara with quiet pride. Years ago, he'd heard her sing at a community event, a memory he'd kept like a secret. After her performance, he approached, his voice low. "I knew you had it in you, Clara. Always did." She smiled, touched by his faith, a small anchor in the storm of newfound attention. His words carried a weight. The other's apologies lacked a reminder that someone had seen her worth long before the spotlight did. Clara gathered her things, her movements deliberate, unhurried. She didn't bask in the crowd's cheers or the producer's backtracking. Instead, she slipped the music box from her pocket, its faint lullaby grounding her. As she walked toward the exit, the stage doors opened to a burst of evening air, cool and sharp against her skin. The other contestants parted silently, their eyes following her, some with awe, others with shame. Clara stepped into the Los Angeles night, her cardigan swaying, her notebook a quiet testament to her triumph. The city's lights stretched before her, but her thoughts were already turning homeward to the life she'd reclaimed and the truths she'd set free. Morning light spilled across Clara Monroe's garden, painting her roses gold, as if the world had paused to listen. Back in Redding, California, Clara sat on her porch, a chipped mug of chamomile tea warming her hands. The whirlwind of Starlight Stage felt like a dream, its roaring applause now a soft echo in her quiet bungalow. At 70, she'd stepped into a spotlight that had once terrified her, not to be praised, but to reclaim the voice she'd silenced for decades. Her notebook lay open on the table, its pages worn, but no longer heavy with doubt. Clara thought of the years she'd spent hiding after Dr. Hale's crushing words, after Tom's death, after countless nights, convincing herself she wasn't enough. Each moment of scorn at the studio had threatened to pull her back into that shadow. Yet, standing on that stage, singing for Tom, for Daniel, for the girl she'd been, she'd found something unshakable. It wasn't the viral clip now at 3 million views, or the letters from strangers who'd started singing again at 50, 60, even 70. It was the peace of knowing she didn't need the world's permission to be herself. A memory surfaced unbidden. At Daniel's high school graduation, Clara had watched him cross the stage, her heart swelling. A mother nearby had whispered, "You must be so proud." Clara had nodded, but her pride was quieter, rooted in the sleepless nights, the sacrifices no one saw. Now she felt that same pride for herself, not loud, but deep. Her fingers brushed the music box, its lullaby, a gentle reminder of Tom's belief in her. As Clara hummed softly, the morning sun caught her gray hair turning it silver. She wasn't the same woman who'd boarded that plane to Los Angeles. She'd learned that courage didn't need youth or glitter, it needed truth. Her voice once buried was hers again, and that was enough. If Clara's journey touched you, hit that like button, and subscribe to join us in celebrating stories of quiet strength. Share your own dreams in the comments. We're listening, and so is the world.